A bit of a lighter slate opened up the month of November, and that isn't always a bad thing. Unfortunately, that means there won't be too much variety in this, with multiple entries from the same wrestler, for example, but there's always plenty to talk about within the ongoings of professional wrestling. With that being said, a quick reminder that I haven't seen every single match to have taken place, and the ones I do choose to talk about are all based on my personal enjoyment and nothing else. A slight spoiler warning, as I will be talking about match finishes here too. After watching 74 matches spanning 15 promotions, here are a few of my favorites from the first half of November. We kick things off in Osaka with Dragongate's Gate of Destiny show, and something that is a staple of the promotion, the unit disbandment match. This is the first of its kind since I've been following Dragongate, and it's the next chapter in the year of channel favorite Jackie Kamei, as well as the intersecting paths and portrayals surrounding him, Big Hug, and Z-Brats. Kamei's former tag team partner Jason Lee is amongst the Z-Brats ranks, and he is flanked by Kota Minoura, who defected from Gold Class over the summer, rounding out the triad of teams putting their existence at stake. Something that did stand out to me amongst the lineups here is the absence of Shun Skywalker. He wrestled previously in the night, in a hardcore match no less, but given that his influence is all over these lineups specifically, you'd think he'd be involved if Z-Brats was at serious risk of ending. Nonetheless, the match is a company staple for a reason, and the majority of this is all gas and no brakes. Jackie and Jason renew their feud from the opening bell, but it was the Gold Class representative who stole the show in my opinion. I thought Rita was absolutely awesome in this fall, constantly pushing the pace, contributing some of the offensive highlights early, and has the narrative through line with Kota Minoura to boot. He does take the brunt of the punishment for his team as well, only making his answers more satisfying when he finds the window to do so. I also think he has a great sense of timing in general, which in a match with so many moving parts is crucial. Take the gross looking double stomp to Jason Lee for example. Lee does receive some comeuppance as his antics blow up in his face, as Ben K would spear his team to safety. Gold Class entered this match down to 3 members, but arguably had the strongest showing here. This brought it down to Big Hug and Z-Brats, and with a very familiar concept in Jackie Kamei on the receiving end of Z-Brats' control. Gold Class hang around long enough to form a united front when Z-Brats begin to rely on interference, and you begin to think that they just might be forced to pay, but the numbers game would prove to be too much. Just like in Steel Cage Survival back in May, Hyo has the deck stacked against him in the dying stages, and after powder to the face, foreign objects, and a golden rose, Big Hug is forced to disband. I like the symmetry of Hyo taking these major decisions, though it felt like Monte was all but absent in the final stretch, which is a shame as I think he actually thrives in these multi-man scenarios. Regardless, the Big Hug experiment is over, and went out in a 15-minute match that absolutely flew by. I think the result was a little predictable considering the drama that this stipulation normally calls for, but bell to bell, it's one of my favorite matches from the promotion's year thus far. I hope going forward we can see Jackie in a more prominent role, now as a member of Gold Class. For further viewing, I'd also recommend the Twin Gate title match from this show, as well as the first night from the King of Gate tournament from the 7th. Unfortunately, not a lot of the tournament made tape due to the promotion ceasing their YouTube digest, but at the very least, I'd say check out something like Daya vs Yamato if you're interested in that. A match I checked out on a whim. As I was going through cards for this window, I realized I haven't watched the Villanos in a while. Facing off against the Pirates of Barco Fantasma, you get a match that is brimming with personality. There is this very stubborn, contentious energy before the bell even rings, and with both teams being rudo, they live up to that through their antics and outright nastiness as the match goes on. From the opening bell, Barboza is swiping at the eyes and mask of El Hijo del Villano Tercero. The real shithousery begins when Sandokan Jr. enters, overpowering the Villanitos and reminding them of the size disparity between them. Between all the posturing and underhanded tactics, that size disadvantage makes the Villanos de facto underdogs in the match, and there's a palatable shift in the crowd during the second fall. Barco Fantasma jump the Villanos on the outside, and the crowd begins to get sick of their antics. To further that irritation, Sandokan Jr. decides to bounce the head of one of the Villanos on the mat and intimidate the referee to boot. These simple actions parlay themselves into Arena Coliseo rallying behind the Villanos in full force, and their crafty offense greatly complements this role. They come storming back to tie things up, elevating the atmosphere for the deciding frame. The third fall isn't outstanding by any means, but it is a great example of using simple means to milk the crowd engagement. Barco Fantasma's fake argument, a slow ref count, and stealing the Villanos' finisher to win the match makes the victory feel undeserved, and in turn puts sympathy on the Villanos in the end. This isn't a match we'll be talking about come year-end list or anything, but I had a great time seeing how these teams worked with the Rudo versus Rudo dynamic and got the crowd hooked by the end. Finding really fun matches like this one is one of the most rewarding aspects of this project, even if they aren't the most consequential in the grand scheme of things. This was one of those cases where on paper, these names with an 11-minute runtime is an ideal scenario, and the match itself lived up to that. It's pretty awesome to have these teams in the middle of your card, and while not having to occupy a main event slot, you avoid a lot of pitfalls. This match is at its best when the bombs are flying, and Sareee and Iwata are great with their time together. It was refreshing to watch Iwata here and in the Shuri tag from the week prior compared to the many long, meandering matches against Saori Ano. I think everyone in this match contributes, but Iwata anchors a great deal of it, between the displays of violence with Sareee and giving Yurika Oka the platform to fight from underneath. Takase is the only one who feels like she's in a defined supporting role, but I think she does a good job of it. There's moments amongst the madness where the higher impact moves do need to be earned, like Oka having to struggle to execute a brainbuster on Takase, and even when she gets the better of the exchange, it takes a lot out of her and she's forced to cycle out. A similar instance occurs in the extended Sareee-Iwata sequence later into the match, where Sareee has to fight for a wheelbarrow German. These moments give balance to the fireworks, but never stop the sprint in its tracks. Chances are you are going out of your way for this for the live rounds, and it does not disappoint in that department. Iwata connects on the majority of her kicks, and what more do I need to say about Sareee at this point? Oka ties this all together nicely in the late stages, as she could realistically pin the Sendai Girls World Champion to set up a future challenge, and her craftiness provides plenty of close calls. Iwata is persistent though, and after multiple attempts, hits a Fire Thunder driver to secure the win. Another hit in the Sendai Girls tag team catalog that gets its point across in a very loud and direct way. With Nanai Takahashi suffering an injury, her title challenge against Sareee would be postponed, and in its place would be a clever inversion of Nanai's signature Passion Injection match. Now Ishikawa was taken under Nanai's wing in the early days of the promotion, though the Sun Goddess is not here to bring out the passion from her opponent, but rather stamp it out. I mean that in the physical sense, as for all intents and purposes, this is a squash match. It also functions as an effective build-up, as Nanai is helpless to only watch her student get the brakes beat off of her by the world champion. Lo and behold, that is exactly what happens. It certainly doesn't take much time. Saree's tone-setting dropkick sets things in motion, and barring one stretch of offense, it's all Sun Goddess. In this Sareee run, we haven't gotten to see this side of her too often, and while she is undoubtedly punishing Ishikawa here, her demeanor scratches a particular itch. It's dismissive, but not in the way you might expect. She relishes being in this spot, but conducts herself with a smile on her face for most of the match. It's a routine outing for her, and her opponent may as well be faceless. She does twist the knife by choosing to employ her offense in Nanai's corner, but she cannot intervene even if she wanted to. I mentioned the stretch where Ishikawa gets her hits in, and she maintains momentum for a couple of minutes, though she makes the grave mistake of entering a 50-50 striking exchange with somebody who is notorious for such. The champion is visibly amused, and you can imagine how the rest of this match unfolds. From the subtle to the more blatant instances of disrespect, there isn't much left for Sareee to pick off the bones, and she can end the match at her leisure. She gives Ishikawa the indignity of cutting off her own pinfall at 2, deciding to drop her on her head as an exclamation point. A real arms too short to box with God scenario that adds fuel to the fire of the looming makeup match the following month, as well as a touch of variety in Saree's extensive 2024 campaign. And before I go, here are some honorable mentions. Roderick Strong vs. Shane Taylor from AEW, November 2nd. On paper and in execution, it's the solid, hard-hitting pro wrestling you'd want on your TV show. Wing Gory vs. Starlight Kid and Suzu Suzuki from Stardom, November 3rd. A great performance from Starlight Kid as a bully in this match. Unfortunately, the limb selling lets it down a bit. Uni vs. Konosuke Takeshita from the DDT Defy and Tokyo Joshi Pro show from November 10th. Takeshita acts as a wall for the smaller high flyer. I think it's one of those cases where the sloppier offense actually complements the match. And last but not least, Kemalito vs. Kemonito from CMLL, November 15th. A red-hot 7-minute sprint elevated by the Arena Mexico crowd, and a scary, scary dive by the new Kemonito. And that is it from me. If you got this far into the video, thank you so much for your time and for hearing what I had to say. Be sure to do all the obligatory YouTube stuff by liking and subscribing. If you want to hear more from me, check out The Underhook Show, a podcast I've recently gotten off the ground with one of my friends I frequently run into at shows in my area. It's much different from the channel, but if you like to hear some discussion on a lot of the week-to-week television and some DPW when applicable, you can find the show on YouTube or your preferred streaming platform. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you again next time with a much busier half of November.